The force bound the galaxy together in unseen currents. Every breath, every star, every life connected by an energy field that whispered of destiny and balance. But on the outer rim world of Kar Delba, where rust-colored deserts met jagged obsidian cliffs, the force recoiled. Something had arrived that did not belong. The sky split open without warning. No hyperspace wake. No repulsor burn. Just a violent rupture in the air itself, as if reality had been torn by an invisible blade. Thunder rolled outward from the wound, flattening sand dunes and sending shockwaves through half-buried ruins that predated the Republic itself. Local moisture farmers would later swear the ground screamed. From that tier fell a figure wreathed in ash and embers. Kratos struck the desert with the force of an orbital strike. The impact carved a crater 20 meters wide, molten glass spiderwebbing outward beneath him. He rose slowly, boots crunching against vitrified sand, breath steady despite the violence of his arrival. Ash drifted from his scarred skin like snowfall. The blades of chaos coiled around his forearms, chains clinking softly, their runes dim but alive. He did not roar. He did not rage. He listened. This world felt wrong. Kratos turned in a slow circle, dark eyes narrowing as he took in the alien horizon. Twin suns hanging low in a copper sky, skeletal rock formations like the ribs of dead giants, and the distant howl of engines that sounded nothing like the longships or beasts of his past. The air itself pressed against him, thick with something unseen. Not magic, not fate, something else. The force brushed against him like a probing hand, and then recoiled, rippling in confusion. Kratos felt it, not as fear, but as resistance. The same instinct he had learned to recognize when facing gods who believed themselves inevitable. He flexed his fingers. Strength answered. His heart thundered with familiar power. Whatever realm this was, it had not stripped him of himself. Good. Fragments of memory surfaced unbidden. A battle unfinished. A god of prophecy screaming defiance as reality collapsed around them. A pull, not toward death, but away from it. Kratos had not chosen this place. Fate, it seemed, had tried to remove him. It had failed. A sharp crack echoed across the desert. Then another. Blaster fire, though Kratos did not yet know the name, lit the dunes in streaks of red and blue. Engines roared closer, rough and poorly maintained. From behind a ridge of black stone crested 3 battered skiffs, their hulls scarred with old impacts and gang markings painted in flaking yellow. Slavers. The skiffs skidded to a halt at the edge of the crater. Armed figures spilled out. Humans and near-humans wrapped in scavenged armor, helmets mismatched, weapons raised with the confidence of those accustomed to helpless prey. One of them laughed, a sharp bark distorted by his vocoder. "By the huts," he said, lowering his rifle just enough to stare. "Did you see that?" Thing fell out of the sky like a criffing meteor. Another nudged him. "You think it alive?" Kratos said nothing. The force whispered to them, unease warning. But greed spoke louder. "Doesn't matter." The first slaver continued. "If it bleeds, it sells. Net him." They fired. Energy crackled through the air, stun bolts slamming into Kratos' chest in a blinding cascade. The impact would have dropped her anchor. The dust cleared to reveal Kratos still standing, feet planted, head tilted slightly downward as he examined the faint scorch marks smoking against his skin. He looked up. The temperature seemed to drop. Kratos moved. The distance between him and the nearest slaver vanished in a heartbeat. One moment the man was raising his weapon again. The next, his arm was gone, torn free at the shoulder. The scream was cut short as Kratos drove his fist through the man's chest, lifting him off the ground before casting the corpse aside like refuse. The others fired wildly now, panic shredding discipline. Bolts splashed against Kratos' skin and armor, some stinging, none stopping him. He ripped one blaster from a slaver's hands and crushed it in his grip, molten metal dripping between his fingers. Another attacker charged with a vibroblade. Kratos caught the weapon mid-swing, snapped it in half, and drove the jagged edge through the man's throat. The force surged around the scene, chaotic and alarmed, like a storm caught off balance. One slaver tried to run. A chain lashed out, wrapping around the fleeing man's leg. Kratos yanked once. The body hit the ground hard enough to break bone. Kratos stood over him, eyes cold. "Where am I?" he asked, voice low and edged with iron. The man sobbed, babbling about the Empire, about credits and quotas, and worlds beyond counting. Kratos understood none of it, only that this galaxy was ruled, exploited, and bled dry by unseen masters. He released the chain. Moments later, silence reclaimed the desert. Smoke curled from ruined skiffs. The force settled, uneasy, whispering to itself. Kratos turned away from the bodies. He had learned long ago that survival in an unknown land required movement, observation, restraint. Rage was a tool, not a compass. As he walked toward the distant lights of a settlement carved into the canyon wall, unseen eyes watched from orbit. Imperial listening posts registered the anomaly seconds too late. Sensors failed to categorize the energy signature. No hyperspace origin. No known species. And far across the stars, in places steeped in shadow, something ancient and dark stirred. The Force had encountered many weapons. It had never encountered a god who had defied destiny and lived. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The wind howled across Car Delba as Kratos disappeared into the canyon, unaware that the galaxy had just taken its first breath with him in it, and that it would never breathe the same way again. The settlement of Ravok's spine clung to the canyon wall like a parasite, its durasteel platforms bolted into obsidian rock, cables and pipes dangling like exposed veins. Floodlights washed the lower levels in sickly white glare, while the upper tiers disappeared into shadow and steam. The air smelled of ozone, old fuel, and desperation. Kratos felt it before he saw it. Fear. Not the sharp, honest terror of prey facing a predator, but the dull, learned fear of beings who had lived too long under someone else's boot. The Force carried it everywhere here, saturating the narrow walkways and cramped dwellings like stale air in a sealed tomb. Kratos' jaw tightened. He had walked cities like this before. Athens. Midgard's ruined villages. Places where power was hoarded and suffering normalized. The locals noticed him immediately. Conversations died as he passed. Hands drifted toward concealed weapons, then froze as eyes traced the scars across his pale skin, the ash-marked red tattoo, the weapons chained to his arms that radiated menace even at rest. Kratos did not threaten them. He did not acknowledge them. He moved with purpose, scanning for threats, exits, and the flow of authority. Every city had a heart, and every heart was guarded. He found it near the central platform, an open bazaar surrounded by cantinas, slave pens, and data kiosks flickering with imperial propaganda. A hologram of a helmeted soldier loomed overhead, declaring order and compliance in a language Kratos did not understand, but whose meaning was unmistakable. Chains rattled. A group of armed enforcers stepped into his path, local muscle, not soldiers. Their armor was better maintained than the slavers outside, their weapons held with practiced ease. At their center stood a broad-shouldered Deveronian with polished horns and a credit stick twirling between clawed fingers. "Well," the Deveronian said, smiling without warmth, "you're either the bravest drifter I've seen or the stupidest." Kratos stopped. The enforcer continued, voice smooth. "Ravok's spine has rules. You walk armed, you pay a fee. You spill blood without permission, you pay a bigger one." His eyes flicked meaningfully toward the blades. "You did spill blood." Kratos studied him in silence. The Force stirred again, whispering danger, urging violence. He ignored it. "I seek passage," Kratos said. "Off this world." Laughter rippled through the enforcers. The Deveronian chuckled. "Everyone does. Thing is, ships don't leave for free. And something tells me," he gestured at Kratos, "you're worth more than a few credits." Kratos felt it then, a subtle pressure at the edge of his mind. Not magic. Influence. Someone was testing him, trying to prod his emotions, gauge his reactions. The dark side brushed against his anger, whispering of how easily these men would break. Kratos exhaled slowly. No, he said. The word landed like a hammer. The Deveronian's smile vanished. He made a sharp gesture. The fight was over before it began. Kratos surged forward, chains snapping taut as the blades of chaos ignited in brilliant orange flame. Heat rolled across the platform, warping durasteel. One enforcer was yanked screaming into the air, slammed headfirst into a bulkhead hard enough to crater it. Another raised his rifle. Kratos hurled a blade through the weapon, then through the man behind it, pinning both to the deck. The Deveronian drew a shock baton and lunged, faster than expected. Kratos caught the baton mid-strike. Electricity surged across his arm, biting deep, but he did not release it. He stepped forward and headbutted the Deveronian with bone-crushing force. Silence followed. Bodies lay scattered. Smoke curled from scorched metal. The force recoiled again, unsettled by how decisively violence had been delivered, without hesitation, without emotional surge. Kratos extinguished the blades and turned. A voice echoed from the shadows. That's one way to negotiate. A woman stepped into the light, flanked by two armored figures bearing insignias Kratos did not recognize. Stylized skulls etched into matte black plates. Mandalorians. Though Kratos knew nothing of their creed, he recognized warriors when he saw them. The woman removed her helmet, revealing sharp eyes and a scar cutting through her eyebrow. Name's Vexarun, she said. We were going to kill those idiots anyway. You just saved us the trouble. Kratos regarded her cautiously. You fight like a god, Vexa continued. But gods don't exist out here. So tell me, what are you? Kratos did not answer. Vexa smiled faintly. Fair enough. Here's the deal. The Empire's sniffing around this rock because of you. Weird energy spike, bodies everywhere. Inquisitors don't like mysteries. The word meant nothing to Kratos, but the tone did. You want off-world, she said. We have a ship. You come with us, help us finish a contract, and we get you passage. No chains. No cages. Kratos felt the weight of the choice settle on him. Trust was a luxury, but stagnation was death. What is the contract? He asked. Vex's eyes hardened. A slaver convoy. Imperial sanctioned. They took children from a mining colony to systems. Over. The force stirred, not whispering now, but watching. Kratos thought of the chains that had bound him. Of gods who claimed necessity as justification. I will help, he said. High above Ravik's spine, a dark shuttle dropped out of hyperspace, its sensors locking onto the settlement. Red lights flared within. An Inquisitor tilted his head, feeling something impossible move through the Force. Something angry. Something free. The Mandalorian ship cut through hyperspace like a spear, its hull vibrating with the strain of an engine pushed beyond comfort. Inside the cramped cargo hold, Kratos stood unmoving, braced without need for restraints, as Starline stretched into infinity beyond the cockpit viewport. The sensation was alien, space folding, reality compressing, but his balance never wavered. He had crossed realms before. This was simply another passage between wars. Vexarun watched him from the cockpit threshold, arms crossed. You didn't flinch, she said. Most people do their first jump. I have endured worse, Kratos replied. That earned a quiet laugh. Yeah, I believe that. The ship dropped back into real space near a shattered moon, debris fields glinting like broken teeth around it. Ahead, 3 Imperial Mark transports drifted in tight formation, escorted by a pair of TIE fighters. Their hulls bore the clean lines of order, white and gray, unmarred by the chaos they carried within. Vex's voice hardened. That's them. Slavers operating under an Imperial charter. Legally untouchable unless someone makes it messy. Kratos' gaze fixed on the transports. He felt it again, that pressure, heavier now. The force surged around the convoy like a dark tide, coiled and alert. It was not guiding him. It was measuring him. The Mandalorians moved with practiced efficiency, sealing helmets, checking weapons. One of them, a broad figure with blue markings, paused near Kratos. You don't wear Beskar, he said. You'll die. Kratos met his stare. No. The Mandalorian snorted and walked away. The attack began without warning. Ion blasts ripped into the lead transport, frying its shields in a cascade of blue light. The Mandalorian ship roared forward, cannons blazing, while Vexa swung them hard to avoid the TIE fighters' return fire. The void filled with streaks of energy and exploding debris. Now, Vexa shouted. The boarding ramp slammed down mid-flight. Kratos launched himself into vacuum. For a heartbeat, there was nothing, no air, no sound, only the cold vastness of space and the distant pull of gravity. Then his boots struck the hull of the nearest transport hard enough to dent durasteel. Magnetic clamps engaged, anchoring him as blaster fire peppered the surface around him. He tore open the hull plating with his bare hands. Inside, chaos reigned. Alarms blared. Stormtroopers shouted orders, their white armor stark against flashing red emergency lights. The Force surged again, pushing against Kratos' mind, testing his resolve. He answered with violence. Kratos tore through the corridor like a living siege engine. Blaster bolts scorched his skin, some biting deeper than before. This galaxy's weapons carried unfamiliar energy signatures, but pain only sharpened his focus. Chains lashed out, blades carving through armor and bulkheads alike. Stormtroopers fell screaming, their formation shattered by a foe who did not slow, did not retreat, did not fear death. He reached the holding cells. Children huddled inside energy cages, eyes wide with terror. Some cried. Others stared at him in stunned silence as Kratos ripped the cages apart. Field generators crushed in his grip. Go, he said, gesturing toward the breached corridor. They hesitated, until a tremor ran through the ship. A presence had arrived. The temperature dropped. The Force went still, then heavy, like a storm about to break. From a far end of the corridor emerged a tall figure in black armor, red lightsaber igniting with a hiss that echoed like a serpent's breath. An Inquisitor. You are an anomaly, the Inquisitor said, voice distorted and cold. You do not belong to the Force, yet you stain it with blood. Kratos stepped forward, placing himself between the children and the Sith hunter. I do not care what you believe. The Inquisitor attacked. The red blade screamed through the air, cutting a lethal arc toward Kratos' neck. Kratos caught the strike on the haft of a Leviathan axe, frost exploding outward as plasma met enchanted steel. The impact drove him back a step, only one, but the Force howled in outrage. The Inquisitor recoiled, startled. Impossible. Kratos advanced, axe swinging in brutal, precise arcs. The Inquisitor countered with telekinesis, hurling debris, slamming Kratos into a wall hard enough to crack it. Pain flared. The dark side surged, clawing at Kratos' rage, urging him to give in. He did not. With a roar, Kratos hurled the axe. It spun end over end, frost trailing behind it, and struck the Inquisitor square in the chest. Armor shattered. The Force screamed. Kratos closed the distance in an instant, chains wrapping around the Inquisitor's wrist. He yanked hard, pulling the Sith hunter off balance, and drove a blade through his chest. The red lightsaber clattered to the floor, extinguished. Silence fell. Kratos turned back to the children. Go. As they fled, the transport shuddered violently. Engines failing, systems collapsing. Kratos moved without hesitation, leaping back into space as the ship began to tear itself apart. The Mandalorian ship scooped him up moments before the transport exploded in a bloom of fire and debris. In the aftermath, as hyperspace swallowed them once more, Vexa stared at Kratos in awe and unease. You killed an Inquisitor, she said quietly. The Empire won't forget that. Kratos stared at his bloodied hands. Neither will I. Far away, on a world of endless night, Darth Vader paused mid-meditation. The Force trembled around him, distorted by a presence he could not see, could not predict. For the first time in years, uncertainty crept into the Dark Lord's thoughts. Hyperspace collapsed around the Mandalorian ship with a thunderous lurch that rattled every loose panel and sent a low groan through the hull. Stars snapped back into existence, smeared briefly by residual motion before resolving into pinpoints of cold light. Ahead loomed the orange-veiled debris field, A dead system circling a failing red dwarf whose light bled weakly across shattered metal and forgotten stone. The system had once mattered. Now it was a grave. Kratos stood braced near the forward bulkhead, unmoving as artificial gravity reasserted itself. His posture was calm, but his senses were alive. Every vibration of the deck, every fluctuation in the air, every subtle shift in the unseen pressure that permeated this galaxy. The force was thicker here. Not stronger, closer. Like stagnant water pooling around old wounds. Vexa Run eased the ship into a slow drift. Engines throttled down to minimum output. Outside the viewport, broken Imperial satellites rotated lazily, their sensor arrays dark, their once pristine hulls scarred by time and scavenger fire. A half-destroyed docking platform hung nearby, its superstructure bent and twisted like the ribcage of some colossal beast. Orin Vale, listening post, Vexa said quietly. Decommissioned after a rebellion went sideways. Empire buried the records. Officially, nothing ever happened here. Kratos said nothing. His eyes tracked the debris field, instinctively mapping angles of approach, blind spots, kill zones. This place had seen violence. He could feel it. Not through the force, but through memory etched into matter itself. The aftermath of desperation had a familiar weight. Cordovan, the Mandalorian warrior with blue sigils across his Beskar, magnetized his boots and moved toward the rear hatch. Doesn't matter what the records say, he muttered. Places like this don't die quiet. The ship latched onto the docking platform with a resonant clang. Metal screamed briefly as centuries-old clamps adjusted to unfamiliar mass. Atmosphere equalized with a hiss. As the ramp lowered, a breath of cold. Recycled air swept inside, stale, metallic, laced with decay. Emergency lumens flickered weakly along the corridor ahead, casting everything in alternating bands of red and shadow. Kratos stepped off the ship last. The moment his boots touched the station's deck plating, the force reacted. It surged not outward, but inward, compressing around him like invisible hands pressing against his chest, his skull, his scars. It was not pain. It was recognition. Kratos paused. The Mandalorians noticed immediately. You feel that, one of them asked, voice tight over the comm. Vexa nodded slowly. Yeah, like the station's holding its breath. Kratos exhaled through his nose. This place is not empty. They advanced in formation, weapons raised, visors scanning. Kratos moved with them, but his attention drifted deeper, beyond the walls, beyond the machinery. Something had been done here. Something steeped in the dark side. Not recent. Old. The kind of darkness that lingered long after its master was gone. Whispers brushed the edges of his thoughts. You do not belong. You never did. You could end them all. Kratos' hands flexed. The chains around his forearms rattled softly, responding to the subtle rise in his pulse. No, he murmured. They reached the central command hub, a circular chamber with a fractured viewport overlooking the system's dying star. A collapsed command chair lay half-melted into the floor, as if crushed by invisible force. Sith runes, faint, almost imperceptible, were etched into the bulkheads beneath layers of paint and carbon scoring. Vexa frowned as she saw them. Kriff. This wasn't just an outpost. Cordo knelt, running a gauntlet over one of the markings. Sith work, he said. Ritual grade. The force thickened further, pulsing in slow, predatory rhythms. Kratos stepped forward, gaze fixed on the runes. They stirred something in him, not recognition, but resonance. The dark side pressed closer, curious, eager. Then the air shifted. Lights flickered violently. The hum of the station deepened into a low, resonant thrum that vibrated through bone and steel alike. The holotable at the chamber's center powered on without being touched, its projection distorting wildly as if struggling to maintain form. Vex's hand snapped to her blaster. Everyone ready. The force plunged. A presence descended like a guillotine, cold, vast, deliberate. Not the raw fury of the Inquisitor Kratos had slain, but something older, smarter, patient. A holographic figure resolved beside the viewport, tall, robed in black, face hidden beneath a hood so deep it seemed to swallow light itself. Two crimson eyes burned within. Kratos of Sparta, the figure intoned, voice echoing unnaturally, layered with harmonic distortion. Ghost of fallen pantheons, breaker of fate. Kratos turned fully toward the projection. You speak my name as if it gives you power. The Sith inclined his head slightly. Names matter. They carry echoes in the Force. A pause. Yours is disruptive. Vexa swallowed. Identify yourself. The Sith's gaze flicked to her, dismissive. Irrelevant. Then back to Kratos. I am Lord Malachar, he said. Emissary of the Dark Council. Voice of the Emperor's will. The Force surged again, heavier now, bearing down on the chamber. One of the Mandalorians staggered, catching himself against a bulkhead. You do not draw upon the Force, Malachar continued, circling Kratos slowly, his image phasing through solid matter with eerie ease. Yet it bends around you, resists you, fears you. Kratos remained still. I have faced fear before. Yes, Malachar said softly. And you conquered it with rage. The dark side lunged. Memories flooded Kratos' mind. Gods screaming, cities burning, blood soaking marble floors. The familiar heat of fury coiled in his chest, hotter here than it had been in years. The dark side did not create the rage. It amplified it. Malachar raised a hand. An invisible pressure slammed into Kratos like a planetary gravity surge. The deck buckled beneath his feet. Cracks spiderwebbed outward. The Mandalorians opened fire instinctively, blaster bolts passing harmlessly through the hologram. Stop. Vexa shouted. Kratos growled as the pressure increased, his knees bending slightly, not from weakness, but resistance. Muscles corded across his frame as he pushed back, veins standing out like steel cables beneath scarred skin. The Force screamed. Malachar's calm cracked. You should be crushed. Kratos straightened, slowly, deliberately, forcing himself upright against power that had shattered warships. I have been crushed, he said through clenched teeth. This is nothing. With a thunderous roar, Kratos surged forward. The pressure shattered, exploding outward in a shockwave that hurled loose equipment across the chamber and slammed Mandalorians into walls. Malachar recoiled, eyes blazing. Fascinating, the Sithist. You do not resist the Force with will alone. You defy it with existence. Kratos' blades ignited, flames casting violent light across the chamber. Speak your purpose. The Sith's voice hardened. The Emperor wishes to meet you. You will kneel, or you will be erased. Kratos took a step closer, heat rolling off him in waves. Tell your Emperor this, he said. I do not kneel. Not to gods. Not to kings. Not to monsters hiding behind destiny. For the first time, Malachar hesitated. This galaxy will break you, the Sith warned. It devours those who stand alone. Kratos' eyes burned. Then it will choke. The hologram vanished violently, the connection severed. Silence crashed down. Alarms began to wail. Cordo looked out the viewport, visor zooming in. We've got a problem. Hyperspace tore open beyond the debris field. A star destroyer emerged, immense, triangular, blotting out the dying star with its shadow. TIE fighters poured from its hangars like insects. Kratos watched without fear. Vex's voice was tight but steady. That's Vader's flagship. The Force shifted again, focused, lethal. Far away, aboard the Star Destroyer, Darth Vader opened his eyes. For the first time since Mustafar, the Dark Lord felt something the Force could not explain. And it unsettled him. The first TIE fighters screamed toward the derelict station in tight, disciplined spirals, their engines howling like predatory beasts loosed from a leash. Green laser fire stitched across the void, carving glowing scars through drifting debris. Explosions rippled outward as old satellites were torn apart, fragments spinning end over end like shrapnel in slow motion. Inside the station, the alarms climbed in pitch until they became a physical thing, vibrating through bone and metal alike. Everyone move. Vexa shouted. Back to the ship, now. The Mandalorians snapped into action, training overriding fear. They moved as a unit, covering angles, retreating in practice bounds through the flickering corridors. Kratos followed, but not at their pace. His gaze was fixed on the viewport, on the immense triangular silhouette advancing with inexorable certainty. The Star Destroyer did not rush. It did not need to. It loomed closer, gravity wells distorting the surrounding debris field as if space itself were bowing. Turbolaser batteries rotated into firing position, each one capable of reducing cities to molten ruin. Somewhere within that mountain of durasteel and command decks, a presence pressed outward through the force, cold, focused, absolute. Darth Vader. Kratos felt him before he understood him. Not rage, not hunger, control. Pain forged into obedience and sharpened into purpose. A being bound by chains far more insidious than any Kratos had ever worn. Kratos. Vexa called. We do not want to be here when tractor beams come online. Kratos turned at last and followed, boots pounding down the corridor as the station shuddered under the first glancing hit from a turbolaser. The impact rippled through the structure, snapping conduits and sending showers of sparks raining down. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut behind them, sealing off sections that vented atmosphere into space. They reached the docking bay just as the Mandalorian ship's engines roared to life. Cordo and the others leapt aboard, covering the ramp as Kratos sprinted up last. The ramp slammed shut. Vexa punched the thrusters. The ship lurched forward, weaving hard as green fire chased them into open space. TIE fighters swarmed, laser cannons blazing. One clipped their port stabilizer, sending the ship spinning violently. Hang on. Vexa snarled, fighting the controls. Kratos braced himself, fingers digging into the deck, plating as inertia screamed through the hull. He felt the force surge again, not from the Sith this time, but from the pilots hunting them. Precognition. Coordination. A net tightening. They will not stop, Kratos said. No, Vexa shot back. They won't. A tractor beam flared to life from the Star Destroyer, a column of blue energy reaching out like a grasping hand. The Mandalorian ship shuddered as the beam locked on, engines straining uselessly against the pole. Warning klaxons blared. Powers dropping. Cordo shouted, "We're not breaking free." Kratos stepped forward, eyes fixed on the forward viewport. The Star Destroyer filled it now, vast, impersonal, unyielding. The embodiment of an empire that believed itself eternal. "I will break it," he said. Vexa stared at him. "You do not mean?" Before she could finish, Kratos moved. He tore open the rear hatch manually, ripping through safety locks as vacuum alarms screamed. The cargo bay depressurized instantly, loose equipment torn free and hurled into space. Kratos stepped into the void. For a heartbeat, even the Mandalorians froze. Then Kratos leapt. The force howled in protest as he hurled himself straight into the tractor beam's pull, chains whipping wildly as the beam dragged him toward the Star Destroyer at terrifying speed. Cold vacuum tore at him, but he did not slow. He had crossed realms of fire and death. Space itself would not stop him. Blaster fire erupted from the Star Destroyer's point defense cannons, streaks of green slamming into Kratos' body. Some struck flesh, biting deep enough to draw blood that instantly crystallized and drifted away. Pain flared, but it was distant, irrelevant. Kratos roared. The sound lost to vacuum, but echoed through the force like a shockwave. He hurled the Leviathan axe. The weapon spun end over end, frost blooming outward as it flew, striking the projector array of the tractor beam with cataclysmic force. The array exploded, ice and metal detonating outward in a violent bloom. The beam collapsed. The Mandalorian ship broke free instantly, engines flaring as Vexa hauled them into a desperate, evasive burn. Kratos slammed into the Star Destroyer's hull moments later, magnetic clamps on his boots engaging by instinct and necessity. He skidded across the armored surface, carving a furrow through durasteel before arresting his momentum near a dorsal superstructure. He stood. The force surged violently now, alarms echoing across the Star Destroyer as crews scrambled in confusion. No boarding shuttle. No breach torpedo. Just a single figure standing openly on the hull of the Empire's most feared warship. Kratos tore into it. He ripped open a maintenance hatch and plunged inside, emerging into a corridor filled with stunned stormtroopers. For half a second, they stared. Then Kratos was among them. Blades of chaos ignited, their fire consuming the narrow passage. Armor split. Bodies fell. Blaster bolts struck Kratos again and again, some staggering him, none stopping him. He fought with brutal efficiency, no wasted motion, no flourish, just relentless advance. The Force screamed louder with every step. Somewhere deep within the ship, Darth Vader felt it. Not a threat, a disruption. Vader rose from his meditation chamber, cape settling around him like a living shadow. His breathing echoed rhythmically as he moved, each step heavy with inevitability. "This one is mine," he intoned. Kratos reached a hangar bay, its cavernous space filled with TIE fighters scrambling for launch. Deck crews scattered in terror as he tore through machinery, hurling a fighter bodily into a cluster of fuel cells. The explosion rocked the bay, fire blooming outward as emergency fields snapped into place. Then the air shifted. The Force went still. A figure emerged from the smoke and flame, tall, armored in black, red lightsaber igniting with a predatory hiss. Darth Vader. For a long moment, the two warriors regarded one another across the burning hangar. Vader spoke first. "You are strong," he said, voice mechanical, implacable. "But strength without discipline is nothing." Kratos' eyes narrowed. "You wear chains," he replied. "Even now." The Force surged violently at the words. Vader attacked. The red blade carved a blinding arc toward Kratos' chest, moving with terrifying speed and precision. Kratos met it head-on, catching the strike on the haft of the Leviathan axe. Frost and plasma exploded outward in a deafening clash that sent shockwaves rippling through the hangar. They separated, then collided again. Vader unleashed the Force, hurling debris, crushing gravity, and focused pressure in rapid succession. Kratos was slammed into the deck hard enough to crater it, but he rose immediately, muscles burning, rage threatening to surge free. He reined it in. With a roar, Kratos charged, chains snapping outward as he attempted to entangle Vader's saber arm. Vader twisted aside, severing one chain mid-flight with surgical precision, but the second wrapped around his forearm. For the first time, Vader staggered. Kratos yanked, dragging the Dark Lord forward and driving his shoulder into Vader's chest. The impact sent both of them skidding across the deck, sparks and flame erupting around them. The Force exploded. Vader retaliated with a crushing telekinetic blast that hurled Kratos bodily into a hangar wall, embedding him deep into durasteel. Pain flared white-hot. The dark side surged, screaming for release. Kratos tore himself free, blood steaming in the cold air. He met Vader's gaze. "You are not a god," Kratos said. "You are a slave who forgot what freedom costs." Vader raised his saber again, but alarms blared louder now. The hangar shook violently as explosions rippled through the ship. Vex's voice crackled through a stolen comm channel. "Kratos, we can't hold the system. Imperial reinforcements inbound." Kratos looked at Vader once more, eyes burning with promise. This is not finished. He hurled the Leviathan axe past Vader, shattering a structural support. The ceiling began to collapse, forcing Vader to leap clear as Kratos turned and sprinted, blasting through an emergency airlock just as the hangar caved in behind him. Space swallowed him again. The Mandalorian ship screamed past, scooping him up in a desperate flyby, before vanishing into hyperspace. Aboard the Star Destroyer, Vader stood amid wreckage and flame, watching the stars stretch and disappear. For the first time in decades, the Dark Lord felt something unfamiliar. Not fear. Anticipation. Hyperspace roared around the Mandalorian ship like an unending storm. Starlines stretched thin and trembling, as if the galaxy itself were straining under pursuit. The engine screamed in protest, pushed far beyond safety margins, and the deck vibrated with a bone-deep intensity that rattled teeth and threatened to tear the vessel apart molecule by molecule. Kratos stood near the rear bulkhead, unmoving despite the turbulence. Blood had dried dark against his skin where blaster fire and durasteel impacts had torn into him. The wounds were already closing, but not without cost. His muscles burned, not from exhaustion, but from restraint. The dark side still clawed at him, lingering like smoke in his lungs after a fire. He hated that feeling. Vexa Rune slammed her fist against the console, then forced herself to breathe. "We lost them," she said, more to convince herself than anyone else. "Barely. Imperial sensors will take time to recalibrate after that mess." Cordo Ven removed his helmet, sweat matting his hair to his scalp. He stared at Kratos with something close to disbelief. "You boarded a Star Destroyer. Alone. Fought Vader. And walked away." Kratos did not look at him. "I did not win. That thing you fought," Cordo said quietly. "No one just walks away from him." Kratos finally turned. "He bleeds," he said. "That is enough." The Mandalorians exchanged uneasy glances. They were warriors, raised on legends of impossible foes. But this was something else. Vader was myth given flesh. And Kratos had met him blade to blade and survived. Hyperspace collapsed once more, stars snapping back into place above an uncharted world bathed in the pale glow of a distant nebula. Below them stretched a planet of dense forests and jagged mountain ranges, its surface largely untouched by civilization. Old sensor buoys, ancient, obsolete, floated in decaying orbits. Vex's fingers danced across the controls. "This is Carthuan's Reach. Neutral territory. No imperial garrison. No official government. Just syndicates, mercenaries, and forgotten wars." Kratos felt the force shift again, not oppressive here, but uneven. Wild. Untamed. Like a blade left half-forged. They descended into a clearing carved into the forest canopy, the ship settling amid towering blackbark trees whose leaves shimmered faintly with bioluminescent veins. The air was thick with moisture and unfamiliar scents, sap, alien pollen, the distant musk of unseen creatures. As the ramp lowered, Kratos stepped down onto solid ground. For the first time since arriving in this galaxy, he felt something approaching quiet. It did not last. A tremor rippled through the force, subtle, but unmistakable. Kratos, head snapped up, eyes scanning the treeline. "You feel it too," Vexa said softly. "Yes." "They followed us?" "No," Kratos replied. "This is different." The forest parted ahead as figures emerged from the shadows, armored, disciplined, moving with purpose, but not hostility. Their armor was battered Beskar, scarred and repainted dozens of times over. Clan markings adorned their pauldrons, old and proud. Mandalorians. Their leader stepped forward, helmet polished black, visor glowing faint amber. "You brought trouble to my world," he said calmly. "And yet you are not running." Vexa inclined her head. "Clan Varroan, right? We're just passing through." The leader's visor tilted slightly toward Kratos. "He is not." Kratos met the Mandalorian's gaze without flinching. "I am Tor Valen," the leader continued. "And you, outsider, fight like a thing out of legend." Kratos said nothing. Tor studied him for a long moment. "Vader hunts you." "Yes." "And you live." "For now." A low chuckle echoed from behind Tor's helmet. "Then you may stay briefly. Not as prey. As a test." The Mandalorians led them deeper into the forest, to a stone ring carved into the earth, an ancient arena predating even Mandalore's scattered clans. Symbols of old wars etched into its surface told stories of honor, betrayal, and survival. Tor gestured toward the ring. "You fight our champion. No blasters. No tricks. Only skill." The dark side stirred again, eager. Kratos stepped into the ring. The Mandalorian champion followed, massive, armored head to toe, wielding a Beskar spear and shield. The duel began without signal. The champion struck first, spear moving with blinding speed. Kratos parried with the Leviathan axe, the clash ringing out like thunder. They traded blows in rapid succession, steel on enchanted steel, shield against axe, each testing the other's timing and resolve. Kratos adapted quickly. Mandalorians fought with precision, discipline, and honor, but they had never faced something like him. He closed the distance, shattered the shield with a brutal overhead strike, and disarmed the spear with a twisting blow that sent it skidding across the stone. The champion fell to one knee. Kratos stopped. He could have ended it. He chose not to. Tor Valon raised a hand. Enough. The Mandalorians murmured among themselves, respect rippling through the ranks. You are not ruled by rage, Tor said. Yet it answers your call. Kratos lowered his axe. Rage is a tool, he said, not a master. Tor considered that. Then hear this. Vader will not stop. The Emperor will not forget. You have become a point of gravity. The Force stirred, as if agreeing. There's a place, Tor continued, beyond Imperial reach. A world strong in the dark side. Sith cultists, broken Jedi, warlords, all drawn there. If you seek answers or war, that is where you will find them. Kratos felt the pull immediately. Stronger. Sharper. What is this world called? He asked. Tor's visor glowed brighter. Moraband. The ancient Sith homeworld. The dark side roared. Kratos closed his eyes briefly, steadying his breath. Moraband promised power, knowledge, endless enemies, everything the rage inside him craved, and everything Atreus had taught him to resist. He opened his eyes. Then that is where I go, he said. Vexa stared at him. That place is death. Kratos turned toward the ship. So was my world. High above, unseen by any sensor, the Force twisted around the choice like a coiled serpent. Far away, in the depths of the Emperor's throne room, Palpatine smiled. The game had truly begun. The trip from Carthuan's Reach to Moraband was tense and fraught with peril. The Mandalorian ship barely cleared the forested planet before a squadron of TIE interceptors dropped out of hyperspace, their screeching engines slicing through the void like predatory birds. Vexa yanked the throttle forward, spiraling into evasive maneuvers that would have shredded lesser vessels. Kratos stood with his arms crossed, chains coiling over his forearms, eyes unblinking, calculating every trajectory, every opening. The Force was alive around them. Not just a whisper this time, but a heartbeat, a pulse that spoke in tremors and eddies. It was subtle yet insistent, a warning and a temptation at once. Kratos had felt it in other realms, but here it was different. It spoke of power unbound, of death and dominion. The dark side bellowed its siren song, but Kratos tightened his jaw, keeping his rage focused, measured, purposeful. Firing back, Vexa shouted, as she unleashed the ship's blasters into pursuing fighters. Green lasers lanced through space, striking TIE hulls, tearing them apart with precise calibration, and a fury that rivaled the Force itself. Even from the cockpit, she could feel the ship shudder under the strain. Kratos moved to the side, chains whipping in arcs that generated small, controlled shockwaves with each spin. He had learned to extend his physical attacks to affect the ship itself, creating defensive bursts of kinetic energy that pushed away debris and enemy fire. The Force seemed to respond, warping subtly around him to increase the impact radius, amplifying his effect without him consciously invoking it. Kriff, they're relentless, Cordo growled. We can't outrun them forever. Kratos' gaze narrowed. Then we fight. The ship dropped out of hyperspace above Moraband, and the planet revealed itself in all its malevolent splendor. Charred plains, jagged obsidian cliffs, and smoke-filled valleys stretched across the horizon. Red lightning forked through the storm-laden skies, striking ruins of ancient Sith temples whose spires jutted like claws toward the heavens. The very atmosphere hummed with the concentrated power of the dark side. First sight of Moraband, Vexa muttered. I've never felt the Force like this anywhere else. It's wrong. Toxic. Kratos said nothing. He could feel it too, and it fascinated him. Unlike the chaotic rage of his own world or the controlled discipline of the Jedi, Moraband's power was ancient, patient, and malignant. The dark side here was not just a tool, not just a weapon. It was a living memory, a tapestry of thousands of years of hatred, ambition, and death. It resonated with everything Kratos had been through, yet it did not recognize him as its servant. The ship landed in a narrow canyon, walls rising high on either side, black rock absorbing the pale red light that filtered from the storm above. They disembarked quickly, weapons ready, and Kratos moved ahead, sensing the currents of power flowing like rivers through the planet. Every stone seemed to vibrate with residual force energy. Every gust of wind carried whispers of long-dead Sith lords. "Stay alert," Kratos said. His voice was low, calm, but carried authority. "They know we are coming." Vexa drew her blaster, Cordo ready to spear, but both instinctively kept a wide berth around Kratos. He moved like a predator, eyes scanning, muscles coiled, every step precise. They entered the ruins of a Sith academy, its hallways lined with cracked statues of forgotten Dark Lords, murals depicting conquests and betrayals, and the lingering scent of burnt incense and decay. A sudden ripple in the Force made Kratos pause. Something was approaching, deliberate and aware. Not an animal, not a wild Force-sensitive, but a conscious presence. He gestured for the others to hold, chains coiling with barely restrained energy. From the shadows emerged three figures, robes tattered, but authority unmistakable. Their eyes glowed with faint crimson, and they moved with a combination of elegance and lethality. Sith acolytes, but not weaklings. They were trained, dangerous, and arrogant. "You dare enter the sacred grounds of Moraband," the tallest hissed, voice like grinding stone. "You carry the stench of other worlds, yet you tread here with purpose." "Why?" Kratos did not answer immediately. He assessed their stance, their weapons, their coordination. Then, slowly, he said, "I seek answers, and I will not bow to ghosts." The acolytes laughed, a sound without warmth, reverberating off the stone walls. "Then you'll be tested," one said, igniting a red lightsaber. "And if you fail," he let the threat hang, unspoken, but understood. Kratos stepped forward, chains snapping outward, glowing faintly as he extended his power through them. The acolytes attacked in unison, a coordinated strike designed to overwhelm. Blades clashed, sparks flew, and the air vibrated with the collision of energy and force. Kratos' combat experience shone immediately. He adapted, parried, and countered with brutal efficiency. The first acolyte lunged, sabers spinning in arcs meant to disarm and cripple. Kratos caught the blade with the haft of his Leviathan axe, twisting with the momentum to throw the acolyte off balance, sending him crashing into a wall with a metallic crack. The second attacked from above, using force-augmented jumps. Kratos sidestepped, catching him with a chain snap that flung the Sith across the hall. The third, smallest but fastest, circled behind. Kratos sensed him, not through vision, but through the Force, the subtle tug of intention. He spun, chains lashing out, entangling the acolyte's legs and flipping him over. Kratos landed a precise strike to disable, not kill, maintaining his measured approach while demonstrating undeniable dominance. Vexa and Cordo covered flanks, but it was clear Kratos was the focal point. Every movement, every decision was calculated, demonstrating that he had not only adapted to the Force's nuances, but also found ways to bend its interactions through sheer physical presence. The Sith acolytes lay defeated, groaning, alive but broken. Kratos walked past them, chains coiling around his arms. "Tell your masters," he said, "I will not kneel, and I do not fear the dark." At that moment, the ground trembled, a low hum growing into a roar. The storm above Moraband intensified, red lightning striking deeper and more frequently, as if the planet itself had acknowledged the challenge. Shadows stretched unnaturally across walls, moving without form. Kratos paused, feeling the magnitude. Something older was approaching, more powerful than acolytes, more cunning than Vader himself. It was a presence that had shaped galaxies, that had wielded the Force with terrifying precision for centuries. From the deepest temple ruins, a figure emerged, black robes flowing, face hidden, aura radiating control over the dark side, so absolute it made Kratos' hair stand on end. This was no mere Sith. This was an embodiment of the dark side's will on Moraband. "You tread where none survive," the figure said, voice like the cracking of mountains. "I am Darth Nihayros, and you, outsider, are dangerous but foolish." Kratos' chains shifted, coiling like serpents in anticipation. "I have faced gods," he said. Your power does not frighten me. Darth Nihairos tilted his head, sensing not just rage, but the discipline to control it, the history that had forged this weapon from another world. Interesting, he murmured. You are the first to resist Moraband's call in centuries. Most succumb to fury. Most die. You, he stepped closer, the force bending subtly around him, pressing and pulling like a storm. You may be the first to learn its full truth. The next moments erupted in violence. Kratos leapt forward, chains and axe extended, colliding with Darth Nihairos' saber in a collision that sent shockwaves down the canyon walls. Energy and kinetic force tore the ground beneath them, throwing debris into the storm above. Every strike, every parry, was magnified by the force, yet Kratos adapted, compensating for the unique physics of Moraband's dark energy. They fought not just for victory, but for dominance, two forces, one physical, one metaphysical, colliding with cataclysmic consequences. Kratos' chains wrapped around constructs, pulled with controlled strength, creating leverage against Nihairos' telekinetic attacks. Each move was methodical, exploiting weaknesses even in a force-wielding adversary of unimaginable power. Meanwhile, the Mandalorians and Vexa watched from the canyon edges, covering their flanks, taking in the scope of a battle they could neither intervene in nor fully comprehend. They witnessed a being whose very essence disrupted the Force, whose control rivaled legends, yet could be challenged by the raw, unyielding will of a godslayer from another universe. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. Sparks, lightning, and concussive blasts illuminated the canyon. The storm responded to their conflict, as if the planet itself were judging Kratos. And through it all, he fought not for conquest, not for power, but for survival, and the possibility to choose his own path amidst forces that sought to enslave him. Finally, after a strike that shattered part of a temple wall, Kratos landed heavily on the ground, breathing hard but steady. Darth Nihairos paused, assessing. You are formidable. Perhaps more than I anticipated. Kratos lowered his axe, chains coiling once more. I do not bow. I do not yield. I do not fear. A silence fell. Moraband's storm seemed to ease, acknowledging this declaration not as defiance, but as mastery. Darth Nihairos did not attack further, at least not yet. You have potential, Nihairos said finally, stepping back into shadows. But the Emperor, Vader, they will come, and you will face choices no god has made. You cannot escape Moraband forever. Kratos watched him vanish, the echoes of the dark side lingering in his mind. Then I will shape my own destiny, he muttered. Vexa exhaled audibly. I thought that might have been it. Kratos shook his head. We just made ourselves a lot of enemies. Kratos looked at them both, eyes smoldering with intent. Then we continue. Moraband is only the beginning. Above them, the storm raged anew, lightning striking the blackened temples, a constant reminder that power, death, and choice were now inextricably linked. And Kratos, god-killer, wanderer, outsider, would walk the path alone if he had to, defining the rules of engagement in a galaxy that had never seen anything like him. The wind tore across Moraband's jagged plains like a living thing, thick with ash and the acrid tang of ozone from countless storms. Lightning forked above in unpredictable arcs, illuminating ruins of ancient Sith temples that looked more like skeletal remains of a long-dead god than any building. Kratos moved forward, chains coiling, Leviathan axe at the ready, scanning for threats. The Mandalorians and Vexa Run followed at a careful distance, their weapons primed, senses alert. Every step carried the weight of centuries of dark energy, and the Force here was more than just alive. It was hungry. Kratos felt it pressing against him, testing him, trying to find weakness in flesh or mind. He had faced gods, titans, and monsters from worlds beyond imagining. Yet Moraband whispered secrets in a language older than war itself. It tempted him, promised power beyond any mortal reckoning, offered visions of dominion and vengeance. He ignored it. Rage was familiar, but submission was not. Discipline and intent drove him forward. Ahead, a massive spire rose from the volcanic plains, a Sith temple larger than most cities he had seen on other worlds. Its black stone absorbed the red lightning, giving the appearance of glowing veins running throughout its walls. Smoke and haze swirled at its base, moving as though alive. From within, the dark currents of the force emanated like invisible tendrils seeking to wrap around his mind and pull him into darkness. Kratos adjusted his stance, the chains around his forearms tightening instinctively. "We're not alone," Vexa whispered, scanning with her sensors. "The readings, they're off the charts. Whoever is here, they're expecting us." Kratos' hand tightened on his spear. Expecting or hunting? Kratos didn't answer. He could feel it, not from sensors, not from sound, but from the force itself. A presence immense, controlled, and singular, pulsed in waves that almost overwhelmed him. Then he sensed the smaller presences, cultists, Sith apprentices, dark acolytes, all converging toward the temple in response to their intrusion. "Good," Kratos said finally. "Let them come." The group approached the temple cautiously. The main doors were carved from black stone etched with glowing red glyphs that pulsed faintly in rhythm with the planet's dark energy. Each glyph radiated raw power. Kratos ran his fingers across one, feeling it vibrate like it were alive, a residual trap designed to ensnare even the strongest of minds. He stepped back, chains rattling softly. "This temple," Kratos said, voice low, "is a crucible. It tests those who enter, not just strength, but resolve." Vexa swallowed, her hand still on her blaster. "Then it's a good thing we have you." He did not respond, eyes scanning. Moriband's storm intensified above, thunder rattling through stone corridors and deep into the temple's foundation. With each flash of lightning, the temple seemed to move, shadows stretching and twisting unnaturally. The force whispered around Kratos, brushing against his mind like fingers of smoke, probing, seeking weakness. He tightened his jaw and focused. He would not falter. Not here. Not now. As they stepped inside, the air grew thick with the energy of the dark side. Statues of long-dead Sith lined the corridors, each one carved in battle poses, some with frozen expressions of agony, others of triumph. Holocrons floated in protective fields, projecting faint light and pulsing with knowledge forbidden to all but the most adept in the dark side. The corridors themselves seemed alive, twisting subtly to mislead intruders. Kratos led the group through the labyrinthine halls, relying on instinct and his unique perception of the force currents that pulsed faintly, guiding him forward. He paused at a large atrium where shadows flickered unnaturally, revealing a dozen Sith cultists waiting, lightsabers ignited and eyes glowing crimson. "You've come far," the tallest said, voice cold and deliberate. "Yet you tread dangerous ground. The dark side welcomes many and consumes all who falter." Kratos flexed his fingers around the axe. "I do not falter." The cultists lunged, sabers swinging in precise arcs designed to overwhelm. Kratos met them with controlled fury, chains snapping outward to entangle one, hurl another into a stone pillar. His movements were brutal, efficient, but measured, demonstrating not just raw power, but tactical acumen. Each strike was designed to disable without unnecessary waste, leaving enemies alive only long enough to understand their failure. Section 8. The wind tore across Moriband's jagged plains like a living thing, thick with ash and the acrid tang of ozone from countless storms. Lightning forked above in unpredictable arcs, illuminating ruins of ancient Sith temples that looked more like skeletal remains of a long-dead god than any building. Kratos moved forward, chains coiling, Leviathan axe at the ready, scanning for threats. The Mandalorians and Vexa Rune followed at a careful distance, their weapons primed, senses alert. Every step carried the weight of centuries of dark energy, and the force here was more than just alive, it was hungry. Kratos felt it pressing against him, testing him, trying to find weakness in flesh or mind. He had faced gods, titans, and monsters from worlds beyond imagining. Yet Moriband whispered secrets in a language older than war itself. It tempted him, promised power beyond any mortal reckoning, offered visions of dominion and vengeance. He ignored it. Rage was familiar, but submission was not. Discipline and intent drove him forward. Ahead, a massive spire rose from the volcanic plains, a Sith temple larger than most cities he had seen on other worlds. Its black stone absorbed the red lightning, giving the appearance of glowing veins running throughout its walls. Smoke and haze swirled at its base, moving as though alive. From within, the dark currents of the Force emanated like invisible tendrils seeking to wrap around his mind and pull him into darkness. Kratos adjusted his stance, the chains around his forearms tightening instinctively. "We're not alone," Vexa whispered, scanning with her sensors. "The readings, they're off the charts. Whoever is here, they're expecting us." Kratos' hand tightened on his spear. Expecting or hunting? Kratos didn't answer. He could feel it, not from sensors, not from sound, but from the Force itself. A presence immense, controlled, and singular, pulsed in waves that almost overwhelmed him. Then he sensed the smaller presences, cultists, Sith apprentices, dark acolytes, all converging toward the temple in response to their intrusion. "Good," Kratos said finally. "Let them come." The group approached the temple cautiously. The main doors were carved from black stone etched with glowing red glyphs that pulsed faintly in rhythm with the planet's dark energy. Each glyph radiated raw power. Kratos ran his fingers across one, feeling it vibrate like it were alive, a residual trap designed to ensnare even the strongest of minds. He stepped back, chains rattling softly. "This temple," Kratos said, voice low, "is a crucible. It tests those who enter, not just strength, but resolve." Vexa swallowed, her hands still on her blaster. "Then it's a good thing we have you." He did not respond, eyes scanning. Moraband storm intensified above, thunder rattling through stone corridors and deep into the temple's foundation. With each flash of lightning, the temple seemed to move, shadows stretching and twisting unnaturally. The Force whispered around Kratos, brushing against his mind like fingers of smoke, probing, seeking weakness. He tightened his jaw and focused. He would not falter. Not here. Not now. As they stepped inside, the air grew thick with the energy of the dark side. Statues of long dead Sith lined the corridors, each one carved in battle poses, some with frozen expressions of agony, others of triumph. Holocrons floated in protective fields, projecting faint light and pulsing with knowledge forbidden to all but the most adept in the dark side. The corridors themselves seemed alive, twisting subtly to mislead intruders. Kratos led the group through the labyrinthine halls, relying on instinct and his unique perception of the Force currents that pulsed faintly, guiding him forward. He paused at a large atrium where shadows flickered unnaturally, revealing a dozen Sith cultists waiting, lightsabers ignited and eyes glowing crimson. "You've come far," the tallest said, voice cold and deliberate. "Yet you tread dangerous ground. The dark side welcomes many and consumes all who falter." Kratos flexed his fingers around the axe. "I do not falter." The cultists lunged, sabers swinging in precise arcs designed to overwhelm. Kratos met them with controlled fury, chains snapping outward to entangle one, hurl another into a stone pillar. His movements were brutal, efficient, but measured, demonstrating not just raw power, but tactical acumen. Each strike was designed to disable without unnecessary waste, leaving enemies alive only long enough to understand their failure. Vexa and Cordo covered their flanks, firing blasters and engaging those Kratos did not reach immediately. The Sith cultists attempted to flank, but Kratos anticipated their movements, using the chains to pull debris and throw them off balance. He moved like a conductor, orchestrating the battlefield with his own physical mastery and an instinctive understanding of the Force's subtle influence. Then, from the shadows, a surge of Force energy erupted, a telekinetic pulse so strong it threw Kratos backward against the temple wall. The Force screamed with malevolent intent, the air itself vibrating. Kratos landed heavily, chains rattling and Leviathan axe steady. A figure emerged, taller than the cultists, draped in flowing black robes, eyes glowing red and penetrating. This was no mere acolyte. This was a Sith who had not yet revealed his name, but whose power exuded mastery over the dark side at a level Kratos had never encountered in this galaxy. Kratos, the figure intoned, voice layered with the Force itself. Your reputation precedes you. Yet even legends can be broken here. Kratos rose slowly, chains coiling like serpents. I do not bow to legends, and I do not break. I endure. The Sith ignited his crimson blade. Then you will teach me endurance. What followed was a battle that defied ordinary comprehension. The Force flared violently with every clash of Leviathan axe and saber. Kratos moved with precision, anticipating not just attacks, but the way the Force bent to the Sith's will. He used the environment, collapsing pillars, throwing chunks of stone, and redirecting Force currents through his chains to disrupt the enemy's attacks. The Sith countered with devastating mastery, using telekinetic pushes, lightning, and acrobatic strikes, yet Kratos adapted. Every moment a test, every maneuver a challenge, he met with brutal ingenuity. The cultists tried to intervene again, but Kratos' calculated strikes and the controlled chaos of the battle kept them at bay. One by one, they fell to his chains, strikes, or the sheer presence of his unyielding will. Every victory was immediate, decisive, and effective. Even Vexa and Cordo felt the weight of his power, knowing that Kratos operated at levels most beings could only dream of, yet always with conscious restraint. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. Time distorted in Moraband's oppressive energy. The storm outside intensified, lightning illuminating the temple as if bearing witness. Kratos pressed on relentlessly, driving the Sith back, testing their limits, measuring their resolve. Finally, the Sith paused, breathing heavily. The dark energy pulsed through the temple, alive, curious, but constrained. Kratos stood, chains coiled, axe raised, looking down at his opponent. You are strong, the Sith said, voice strained, but this world will claim many before it is done. You are an anomaly, a disruption in the current of destiny. Kratos stepped closer. Then it is a current I will master. Lightning flashed above the temple, the storm answering Kratos' declaration, as if the planet itself recognized his defiance. The Sith stepped back into the shadows, disappearing into the corridors, leaving Kratos standing amid the ruins. He had survived Moraband's first test, but he knew instinctively that it was only the beginning. Greater powers waited deeper in the heart of the temple, forces that could rival anything he had faced across the worlds he had conquered. And he would face them all, alone if necessary. Vexa approached cautiously, voice low. That was incredible. Are you okay? Kratos nodded, chains rattling softly. I am not done. This temple has more to teach, and I intend to learn. Cordo exhaled, shaking his head. You just keep raising the stakes, don't you? Kratos looked toward the central spire of the temple, where shadows danced like living entities. Power is not given. It is taken, understood, and endured. Moraband will teach us if we survive. Above, the storm raged with renewed intensity, lightning streaking across the obsidian spires and striking deep into the temple's foundation. The dark side was aware now, watching, testing, and yet it had not broken him. Kratos clenched his jaw, chains tightening once more, and took the first steps deeper into the heart of Moraband, each footfall echoing through centuries of darkness. This was not just survival, it was war, knowledge, and mastery combined. And he would not stop until he had claimed every lesson this cursed world had to offer. Moraband's storm tore across the obsidian plains, its fury now a living entity, a manifestation of millennia of Sith ambition and hatred. Lightning slashed through the sky in crimson and white arcs, illuminating temples that had not seen life in centuries. The air thrummed with raw dark side energy, pressing against Kratos and the Mandalorian contingent with the weight of 1,000 ghosts. The Leviathan axe hung at his side, chains coiling like serpents ready to strike. Every step he took resonated with intent and purpose. He had survived the temple's outer trials and the ambush of the acolytes, but now he approached the heart of Moraband, the pinnacle where power converged and destiny waited. Vexa Run piloted the ship to a hovering perch above the canyon, scanning the temple with detailed sensors. Kratos, she said cautiously, whatever is in there, it's different. More powerful than anything we've faced. This isn't just Sith. This is the essence of the dark side itself. Kratos' eyes were fixed on the central spire. Power is meaningless without will. I have survived gods, titans, and monsters. This is no different. Cordo Ven muttered under his breath, his hand resting on the haft of his spear. I've seen warriors, and I've seen killers. I've never seen him. And now he's walking into a place that could kill him a dozen times over. Kratos did not flinch. He advanced into the temple's inner sanctum, the walls narrowing as towering statues of Sith lords loomed over him, eyes glowing faintly, seeming to follow his movements. Holocrons floated in protective fields, emitting faint pulses that echoed through the Force like whispers of forgotten knowledge. The Force itself seemed to pulse in anticipation, aware of the climactic encounter to come. In the central chamber, a massive dais rose from the obsidian floor, inscribed with ancient runes and surrounded by a swirling vortex of Force energy. At its center stood a figure clad in flowing black robes, his presence exuding the dark side at an intensity that made the very stones tremble. His eyes glowed crimson beneath a hood, and in his hand rested a double-bladed lightsaber, its edges crackling with red energy. This was no ordinary Sith. This was a master of the dark side, a culmination of centuries of concentrated power. You have come far, outsider, the Sith intoned, voice resonant with the weight of the Force. Few have stepped onto Moraband and survived. Fewer still have dared to challenge what lies within. Kratos stepped forward, chains coiling with latent energy. I have not come to kneel. I have come to test the limits of strength, will, and resolve. The Sith raised his double-bladed weapon, igniting it with a hiss that echoed through the chamber. Then you shall learn the true cost of defiance. The battle began with a violent collision of will and power. Kratos surged forward, chains and axe extending, striking with precise, calculated brutality. The Sith countered with Force-enhanced agility, deflecting and absorbing the strikes, retaliating with telekinetic blasts that sent Kratos hurtling against the chamber walls. The sound of durasteel shattering and stone crumbling echoed like thunder as Kratos absorbed the blows, adapting his movements to the unpredictable currents of dark side energy. Each strike Kratos delivered was a combination of raw strength and tactical precision. He spun, chains whipping to entangle limbs, axe swinging with devastating force, using the temple's environment to his advantage. Columns toppled, statues shattered, and the floor cracked beneath the impact of their movements. The Sith attempted to overwhelm him with Force lightning, but Kratos anticipated the surge, redirecting it with chains coiled to conduct the energy harmlessly into the surrounding structure, an improvised conduit that sent sparks flying in all directions. The chamber became a storm unto itself. The Force roared, surging through Kratos, as if testing his ability to withstand Moraband's oppressive presence. He felt visions of conquest, death, and power, trials designed to tempt him into submission, but he remained resolute. Rage, fury, and hatred were tools, not masters, and he wielded them with precision. Every move was calculated, every counter intentional. At one point, the Sith leapt onto a floating dais, spinning in midair, using the Force to hurl debris and shards of stone like deadly missiles. Kratos responded in kind, chains snapping outward to deflect incoming projectiles and redirect them toward the enemy. The Leviathan axe struck with brutal accuracy, forcing the Sith to deflect while simultaneously managing the swirling currents of Force energy. Sparks, red lightning, and debris flew, illuminating the chamber in stroboscopic flashes of violence. Hours, if measured in Moraband's distorted time, passed in relentless combat. Kratos adapted to the Sith's techniques, exploiting openings with precision honed from centuries of battle. He learned the rhythm of the dark side's flow in real time, using his chains and axe to channel energy against the Sith, turning the enemy's own power into a weapon. Every blow, every maneuver was a declaration. He would not yield, he would not falter, and he would survive. Finally, the Sith lunged with a devastating telekinetic strike aimed directly at Kratos' chest. The impact threatened to lift him from his feet, but Kratos anchored himself with chains coiled around the floor, absorbing and redirecting the force. With a roar, he surged forward, striking the Sith's midsection with the Leviathan axe. The force of the blow sent the Sith staggering backward, forcing him to ignite both blades defensively. Kratos followed immediately, spinning the chains with precise timing, wrapping them around the Sith's arms and momentarily disarming him. The Sith stumbled, but his mastery was far from broken. He retaliated with a torrent of force energy, hurling columns of stone toward Kratos. Kratos dodged and blocked, countering with an improvised strike that sent the Sith reeling into a collapsed wall. For a moment, both warriors stood amid the chaos, breathing heavily, recognizing the skill and resolve in each other. "You endure," the Sith said, voice strained. "Few possess your will. Even fewer can resist the dark side's temptation here." Kratos' eyes narrowed. "I do not resist for myself. I resist for those who cannot fight. For those who rely on the strong to endure where they cannot." The Sith regarded him for a long moment, the red glow of his blades reflecting in the obsidian walls. "Then you are unlike any mortal or god I have faced. Perhaps you are worthy of Moraband's secrets." Kratos did not respond. He pressed forward, chains coiling and axe swinging with relentless precision. The Sith countered, but with each exchange, Kratos' understanding of the dark side's flow increased. He began to anticipate, to manipulate, to turn the planet's oppressive energy against its denizens. By the time the final exchange occurred, the Sith had been driven to a corner of the chamber, energy faltering as Kratos adapted, mastered, and overpowered every strike. The Leviathan axe struck again, cleaving through the Sith's weapon and sending him sprawling. Kratos' chains wrapped tightly around the Sith's limbs, holding him pinned but alive, as a symbol not of conquest, but of dominance tempered by choice. "You cannot break me," the Sith whispered, sweat and energy coursing over his face. "The dark side will consume you eventually." Kratos leaned forward, voice low and steady. "The dark side does not control me. I control myself, and I choose my own path." For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by the distant thunder of Moraband's storm. The Sith, breathing heavily, seemed to recognize that Kratos had not just survived, but had mastered the currents of power, bending the dark side to his will, not the other way around. Above, lightning split the sky, illuminating the ruined temples in stark contrast, the storm acknowledging the outcome. Kratos had triumphed, not through submission to power, but through discipline, cunning, and raw strength combined with understanding. He had faced Moraband itself and emerged unbroken, a force that would leave ripples across the galaxy. Vexa and Cordo approached cautiously. We survived," Vexa said, voice shaky but relieved. "All of us. Somehow." Kratos sheathed the Leviathan axe, chains coiling one final time. "Moraband is not done with me, but I have learned enough for now. The galaxy waits, and I will face it on my terms." The Mandalorians nodded in silent acknowledgement. Kratos had proven himself not just a warrior, but a force beyond the comprehension of even the galaxy's most disciplined Sith. The path forward was uncertain, perilous, and fraught with unimaginable threats. Yet he would walk it, unbroken and unyielding, shaping destiny rather than succumbing to it. The storm over Moraband raged on, red lightning illuminating the ruins of centuries of Sith ambition. Kratos had claimed victory, but the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what this godslayer from another world would do next. The air above Moraband was heavy with the scent of ozone and scorched stone. Storm clouds roiled in tumultuous patterns, lightning dancing across jagged spires of obsidian that jutted from the planet's surface, like skeletal fingers of some long-dead god. Kratos stood at the edge of the central temple's collapsed roof, Leviathan axe in one hand, chains coiled around his forearms. He looked out across the desolate plains, the aftermath of his confrontation with Darth Nihilros and the temple's defenders etched into the scorched earth. The Mandalorians and Vexa Run stood behind him, cautious but resolute. Cordo's spear rested against his shoulder, his eyes scanning the horizon. "So what now?" he asked quietly. "We've survived the worst of Moraband. The Sith are wounded, but they won't stay hidden forever. And neither will the Empire or Vader." Kratos did not respond immediately. His gaze swept the horizon, noting the broken ruins, the flowing energy of the dark side now fractured and chaotic across the plains. "The galaxy," he finally said, "is more dangerous than I imagined. Moraband is only a fraction of it. And yet," he lifted his head, voice low and steady, "I have learned its patterns. I have seen its trials. I am ready." Vexa approached cautiously. "Ready? You faced Sith acolytes, a dark side master, and the storms of this world. Ready doesn't seem enough." Kratos' gaze hardened. "Ready is all that matters. All else is choice. I decide when to strike, when to defend, and when to walk away. That is strength." In the distance, the remnants of Moraband's dark side currents pulsed in response, as if acknowledging his mastery. Kratos could feel it, the power still present, chaotic but contained, no longer seeking to dominate him. His body thrummed with the energy of battle, but he was calm, disciplined. He understood that surviving this planet was not just a testament to strength, but to mastery over himself, his rage, and the temptations of the dark side. The Mandalorians regarded him with a mixture of awe and fear. Tor Valen's words echoed in their minds. This was no ordinary warrior. He was a being whose presence reshaped the dynamics of power in any conflict. His victories were not flukes or brute force. They were the result of discipline, strategy, and an understanding of forces few could comprehend. "We cannot linger here," Cordo said, breaking the tense silence. "The Empire will sense the disturbances in the Force. Vader may already be on his way, and there are others. Cultists, warlords, perhaps remnants of the Emperor's own machinations." Kratos nodded. "Then we move. Moraband has given me what I need to face them. Not answers, but clarity, direction, purpose." As they moved toward their ship, Kratos sensed a ripple across the Force, a presence not bound to the dark side, but observing nonetheless. It was subtle, intelligent, and deliberate, a sentinel of some unknown faction. Perhaps Jedi, perhaps something else. Whoever it was, they had taken notice. The Mandalorian ship lifted off from the canyon floor, engines straining against the turbulence of Moraband storms. Kratos stood at the bow, chains coiled and Leviathan axe ready, watching the planet recede beneath them. Its jagged cliffs and storm-ridden skies would remain etched in memory, not as a tomb, but as a proving ground. He had faced the dark side in its purest, most unyielding form and survived. That knowledge, that mastery, would shape every battle yet to come. Vexa piloted the ship with precision, navigating through turbulence, while Cordo kept a vigilant watch for Imperial patrols. "You realize," Vexa said after a moment of tense silence, "that you've now become a beacon. Power like yours doesn't stay hidden. The Empire, the Sith, maybe even the Rebellion, they will come for you." Kratos' eyes narrowed. "Let them. I do not flee. I do not negotiate from weakness. I act from strength. That is how I survive. That is how I shape the galaxy." The ship entered hyperspace, the stars stretching into elongated streaks as they jumped into the void. Kratos could feel the Force responding, ripples from Moraband traveling faster than any ship could, altering perceptions across systems, drawing attention to the unique anomaly he represented. Even from this distance he sensed it. Vader's relentless pursuit, whispers of Imperial curiosity, Sith intrigue, and unknown observers watching from the shadows of the galaxy. He knew that the path forward would not be easy. Vader would come, relentless and terrifying. The Emperor's attention might already be shifting toward this strange god-killer from another world. Independent factions, warlords, and mercenaries would seek to exploit the chaos his presence generated. Yet for the first time since arriving in this galaxy, Kratos did not feel powerless. He had endured, adapted, and mastered. He was no longer merely a survivor. He was a force unto himself. Days passed in hyperspace, each system bringing new intelligence, new calculations, and new potential threats. Kratos spent the time meditating, recovering, and planning. He understood the intricacies of the Force, now in ways few outsiders ever could. It was not innate mastery, but adaptation, the ability to bend unfamiliar energies to his will, to exploit weaknesses in both the physical and metaphysical battlefield. Vexa monitored communications and intercepted transmissions, tracking Imperial movements and Sith activity. "You've made them cautious," she noted. "The Empire is reorganizing, Vader has increased patrols, and there's chatter among Sith remnants. No one wants to underestimate you now." Kratos' chains rattled softly, a sign of restrained energy, anticipation. "Good. Let them come. Every step they take will be met with resistance. Every threat will be countered. And every choice will be mine." Their ship exited hyperspace near a remote system, unmapped, lawless, and outside immediate Imperial control. It was ideal for establishing a temporary base of operations, a place to gather intelligence, train, and prepare for the inevitable confrontations ahead. Kratos surveyed the barren moon they had chosen as their temporary haven. Rocky outcroppings, deep canyons, and vast caverns offered both defense and concealment. As they landed, Kratos felt the Force shift again, not hostile, not benign, but curious. He walked to the edge of a canyon, chains coiled around his arms, axe resting lightly at his side. The galaxy stretched before him, vast and untamed, filled with factions, powers, and threats, each moving according to its own designs. And Kratos, once a godslayer from another world, was now a player on this cosmic stage. Vexa and Cordo approached him. "So what now?" Vexa asked again, her voice tinged with both awe and caution. Kratos turned, his expression calm but resolute. "We prepare. We learn. We strike when the moment is ours. The galaxy is not a place for the hesitant or the weak. It is a place for those who endure, those who master, and those who choose their path deliberately." Cordo nodded slowly. "You've changed everything here, whether the Empire, the Sith, or anyone else likes it or not." Kratos tightened his grip on the chains. "Let them come. The galaxy will remember my presence, not for what I destroy, but for what I survive, and for the choices I make along the way." As night fell over the barren moon, the stars stretched across the sky, distant suns casting pale light across rocky landscapes. Kratos stood at the edge, the Force swirling subtly around him, not as a master of it, but as a warrior who had learned to wield it in tandem with his own incomparable strength. Moraband had been a crucible, Vader and the Sith had tested him, and the galaxy itself would be next. Every choice he made from here would ripple across systems, factions, and generations. Kratos did not flinch. He had survived gods, titans, and darkness beyond imagining. Now, in a galaxy far, far away, he would forge a new legend, unbound by the rules of any world but his own. The storm on Moraband raged, distant but omnipresent, a reminder that the galaxy itself was watching, waiting, and reacting. Kratos had not just survived. It had taken note of him. The Emperor, the Sith, the Empire, the Rebellion, and every faction in between would feel his presence. And the choices he made next would shape the fate of countless lives. Kratos exhaled slowly, chains rattling softly in the cold air. "This is only the beginning," he muttered. "The galaxy will bend to those who endure." And somewhere in the shadows, unseen forces began to shift, responding to the ripple Kratos had created, a ripple that would become a tidal wave across the galaxy. Kratos' arrival in the Star Wars galaxy had already left indelible marks on multiple fronts. From his confrontation with the dark forces on Moraband to the subtle reshaping of factional dynamics across the Outer Rim, his presence was a catalyst for change. He had survived trials that would have destroyed even the most seasoned Sith, and in doing so, he had proven that raw strength, discipline, and cunning could rival the most potent manipulations of the Force. The galaxy now faced a warrior who was neither Jedi nor Sith, neither rebel nor Imperial, but an independent force of unparalleled capability and resolve. His victories were not without consequence. Moraband storms had reshaped the planet's power currents, leaving lasting distortions in the dark side. The Sith who survived his assault would carry tales of an outsider whose will defied even centuries of accumulated dark knowledge. The Empire, sensing these disturbances, had already begun to adjust patrols, dispatching agents and inquisitors to investigate. The rebellion, too, caught wind of the anomaly, intrigued by a warrior whose might could tip the balance in unforeseen ways. Kratos' very existence challenged the established order, forcing every faction to reconsider their strategies, alliances, and assumptions. Yet Kratos was not simply a harbinger of chaos. He had chosen his path deliberately, acting with purpose and restraint, demonstrating that power was to be wielded with intent, not impulse. He had endured the darkness and emerged unbroken, setting the stage for future confrontations, alliances, and moral dilemmas. The galaxy would never be the same, and the legend of the God-Slayer from another world would echo across star systems, inspiring fear, awe, and cautious admiration. Kratos now stood on the threshold of the galaxy, his chains coiled, Leviathan axe ready, and mind sharpened by trials both mortal and divine. Whatever challenges lay ahead, be they Sith, Empire, Rebel, or forces yet unseen, he would meet them as he always had, with unyielding resolve, unparalleled skill, and the fierce independence that defined him across worlds. His journey was far from over, and the ripple he created would shape destinies for years to come. The galaxy had gained a warrior unlike any it had known, a force capable of defying the darkest powers and surviving where most would perish. Kratos' legend had only just begun,